Wendy grew up in a house that looked like a dream from the outside. It was large, spotless, and expensive in every detail. White marble staircases reflected soft lights from crystal chandeliers. The walls were painted in calm, elegant colors, and every piece of furniture seemed carefully chosen to display wealth and perfection. Yet behind all that beauty, the house felt cold. Not physically, but emotionally. It was a place where silence lived comfortably and loneliness echoed without resistance. Wendy was 21 years old, a university student who had never lacked material comfort. Whatever she wanted came easily. Clothes, gadgets, cars, and unlimited pocket money were always available without questions or conditions. Her parents believed that providing luxury was the same as providing love. Unfortunately, Wendy had learned early that the two were not the same. Her father was a successful businessman whose life revolved around meetings, contracts, and constant travel. He left the house before sunrise and often returned late at night, exhausted and distant. Sometimes days passed without Wendy seeing him at all. Her mother, Mrs. Cinta, owned a rapidly growing fashion business. Even when she was at home, she was never truly present. Her phone rang endlessly. Her laptop was always open and her mind was permanently occupied with designs, orders, and runway schedules. From a young age, Wendy grew accustomed to eating alone at the long dining table. Conversations were brief, mechanical, and rare. There were no shared stories, no laughter, no warmth. Over time, Wendy stopped expecting those things. Instead, she learned to distract herself. As she grew older, the emptiness inside her became heavier. The house felt larger, its long corridors more intimidating. At night, when the lights were dim and the servants had retired to their quarters, Wendy often wandered through the living room, listening to the sound of her own footsteps. The echo followed her, mocking her presence, reminding her how alone she truly was. Deep down, Wendy knew she was tired of living this way, but she didn't know how to stop. Slowing down meant facing the loneliness she had been running from for years, and that was something she was not ready to do. So, she chose escape. Evenings were rarely spent at home. After university, she stayed out late, hanging out with friends, attending parties, and surrounding herself with noise. She laughed easily, flirted openly, and never hesitated to cross boundaries if it meant feeling wanted, even for a moment. Romantic relationships came and went quickly. None of them were serious. For Wendy, they were temporary shelters against loneliness. Yet, no matter how late she returned home, the same emptiness awaited her. The massive living room, the marble staircase, the silent walls, everything seemed unchanged. Sometimes she stood in the middle of the house, completely still, as if hoping the walls might speak to her or that someone would suddenly call her name. But nothing ever happened. One quiet morning, as sunlight filtered through the large windows, Wendy stood behind the curtains in her room. Her gaze drifted down to the driveway where something unusual caught her attention. A young man stood near the family car. His appearance was simple, almost shabby. He was tall and slim with slightly messy black hair. His clothes were modest, clearly not belonging to someone from her social world. Yet, there was something calm and composed about him. Wendy frowned in curiosity. Her family had never hired young drivers before. The man's movements were polite, careful, almost shy. Without realizing it, Wendy kept watching him longer than she intended. For the first time in a while, the house felt different. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know his story. But somehow, his quiet presence stirred something inside her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. And without knowing it, Wendy stood at the edge of a life-changing chapter. Wendy did not go downstairs immediately. She stayed behind the curtain, quietly observing the young man near the driveway. He wiped the surface of the car carefully with a small cloth as if afraid of making a mistake. Every movement was slow and respectful. There was no arrogance in him, no rush, no attempt to impress. That alone made him different from the people Wendy usually encountered in her world. Her curiosity grew stronger. After a few minutes, Wendy finally stepped out of her room. She walked down the marble staircase lazily, still wearing her nightgown, her hair loose and slightly messy. The house was unusually quiet. and the sound of her footsteps echoed softly. As she reached the ground floor, she heard the faint sound of a car door closing. The young man straightened up immediately. "Are you the new driver?" Wendy asked, breaking the silence. He flinched slightly, clearly startled, then turned around quickly. Yes, miss," he replied nervously. "My name is Ravon." Wendy tilted her head, studying him openly. "You're quite young," she said casually, leaning against a pillar. "My parents usually hire drivers much older than you." Rand smiled stiffly, his hands gripping the cloth tighter. "I was surprised too, miss. But I promise I'll work hard." Wendy noticed his hands trembling slightly. He didn't look like someone experienced or confident, yet there was a sincerity in his eyes that caught her attention. It wasn't the kind of confidence she was used to. Loud, flashy, demanding. This was something quieter. "Relax, Wendy," said lightly. "I'm Wendy." "Yes, Miss Wendy," Ravon replied quickly, bowing his head slightly. Their conversation could have ended there. Normally, Wendy would have lost interest and walked away, but instead she stayed. She pulled a chair closer and sat near the garage entrance while Riven waited for Mrs. Cinta to come out. "Where are you from?" Wendy asked. "From out of town," Riven answered. "I came here to work and save some money." Wendy smiled faintly. "You sound very innocent." Riven laughed awkwardly. "Maybe." Something about his honesty felt refreshing. There was no flirting, no hidden intention, just simple answers spoken carefully. For the first time in a long while, Wendy felt comfortable sitting in silence with someone. That day, their conversation continued in short fragments. Music, traffic, the weather, nothing deep, nothing personal. Yet, when Wendy returned to her room later, she realized something strange. She felt lighter. The house no longer felt as suffocating as it usually did. From that day on, Wendy found herself coming downstairs more often whenever Riven was around. Sometimes she didn't even realize she was doing it. The sound of the car engine or footsteps near the garage triggered an automatic response. She would appear casually pretending it was a coincidence. Riven, too, began to anticipate her presence, though he tried hard not to show it. He always remained polite, respectful, careful with his words. One morning while checking the car, Riven asked hesitantly, "Miss, don't you have lectures today?" "Afternoon class?" Wendy replied, crossing her arms. "Why?" "Oh, nothing," Riven said quickly. "Just asking." Wendy smiled. "Why do you care?" Riven chuckled nervously. "I don't. I mean, I was just curious." Their conversations slowly became more frequent. Wendy started sharing small details about her life, how her parents were rarely home, how the house felt empty. She didn't speak dramatically. She didn't complain. She simply spoke. Sometimes she said, "It feels like I'm just staying in that house, not living in it." Ravon listened quietly. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice. He simply nodded, his attention fully on her. "You look strong," he said once. Wendy shook her head. "No, I just got used to it." That sentence stayed with Riven long after she walked away. Without realizing it, both of them had begun to fill a small space in each other's lives. It wasn't romance yet. It wasn't desire. It was something simpler and perhaps more dangerous. It was presence. And in a house where silence ruled, that presence slowly began to matter more than either of them expected. Days passed, and without either of them openly acknowledging it, Wendy and Riven's presence in each other's routine became natural. What had started as casual conversations near the garage slowly turned into moments both of them quietly waited for. Wendy found herself waking up earlier, not because she had plans, but because she knew Riven would be outside preparing the car, and Ravon, despite his disciplined nature, began adjusting his timing just enough to ensure she might appear. Their conversations grew longer, still simple, still careful, but no longer distant. Wendy spoke more freely now. She laughed more easily, teased him gently, and sometimes stayed longer than necessary, leaning against the doorway while he worked. Ravon and Anais, who was usually reserved, started, responding with small smiles and short jokes of his own. One afternoon, Wendy sat on the steps near the garage, watching Rayvon clean the car. "Do you ever get bored?" she asked suddenly. Riven paused. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I think boredom is better than chaos." Wendy raised an eyebrow. "You? Sound like someone much older than me." Ron smiled faintly. "Life makes people grow up faster than they want to." His words unsettled her slightly. Most men she knew spoke loudly, showed off, or tried too hard to impress her. Riven never did. That difference made her feel both curious and uneasy. As the days went on, Wendy began staying at home more often. Parties felt louder, conversations felt emptier. She still went out occasionally, but her thoughts drifted back to the quiet moments at home. The way Revan listened, the calm in his voice, the absence of pressure. One evening, a heavy storm hit the city. Thunder cracked across the sky and rain poured down relentlessly. Wendy hated storms. The sound of lightning made her chest tighten, bringing back memories she never spoke about. Unable to stay in her room, she went downstairs and found Rayvon sitting alone in the living room, waiting for Mrs. Cinta to return. He looked up in surprise when he saw her. "Scared?" he asked gently, half joking. Wendy nodded, trying to laugh it off. "A little." She sat beside him closer than necessary. The storm outside grew louder, but inside the room, the air felt tense and quiet. Wendy noticed the faint scent of soap on Riven's clothes, clean and simple. She turned her head slightly, studying his face longer than she should have. "Ryan," she said softly, "do I make you uncomfortable?" Rayvon swallowed hard. "No." She leaned back against the sofa, her shoulder brushing his arm. Rayvon stiffened but didn't move away. Seconds stretched into silence. Their breathing felt louder than the thunder outside. "This isn't right," Rayvon said finally, his voice low. Wendy looked at him. "Why?" she asked calmly. "Because you work here." Riven hesitated. "Because lines exist for a reason." Wendy smiled faintly.